Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, episode 450. We're going to talk about just a bunch of uh, random topics, but they all kind of connect. So, in my arbitration hearing, the topic of strikes had come up. So I think the last semester that I taught there, the graduate students went on strike. They just walked off the job at the beginning of the semester, and they encouraged a lot of undergraduates to go walk the picket line with them. And they made all kinds of promises. And so students had asked me what I thought about the strike, and I gave my opinion. But I think what happened was there were rumors that going around that they would block the entrances of certain buildings. Also, I forget why, but there was the sense that there might even be physical, uh, intervention or physical people physically blocking entrances, right? And so it was very unclear how things were going to go down. There wasn't a lot of communication. And, uh, you know, just in case, I sent an email to everyone that, uh, I was going to be there no matter what. And so they should make an effort to show up for class as well. And so that email was read in the arbitration hearing without any kind of context. And the statements in the email could have been read in several ways, and almost in a way that it was, I guess, implying violence. Okay. At least that's my take. I don't know. The way it was read, they didn't elaborate. So the so I asked everyone, do you want to know what the context of the email was? And no one was interested, not my lawyer, not the university lawyer, and it didn't matter. All they were trying to do was use the words and then and basically put words in my mouth in terms of what I meant by those words. So this is just sort of a heads up on anyone. This is why it is very important, why a lot of corporations and a lot of businesses, they have that, footnote at the end of their email. Like this email is intended only for certain people, blah, blah, blah. There are all these conditions and sort of disclaimers and whatnot, I think because of the legal implications of anything. And so that was kind of what was interesting. But I wanted everyone to know that what the gist of the emails and everything that I said in class was for the benefit of the undergraduate student. In other words, all of the other people involved in the strike phenomena, they knew what they were doing. Okay. But the undergraduates, I mean, what do they know? Only what they are told. And I know for a fact that people who are involved in the strike will only say one side of the story. They will only share the upside. They won't share any of the downside risk, right? What might happen if things don't turn out in the way that they want. And so I wanted my students to know exactly what was going on so that they could make a decision, right, on their own personal interests, right? And, what everyone can feel sorry for grad students, you know, um, maybe I didn't, but a lot of people could feel sorry for them if they wanted, but would you feel sorry enough if it jeopardized an entire semester's tuition? Everything, and if you dormed at the same time too, then you'd be putting on the table everything you put out for dormitories as well. Living expenses, you're putting that all on the line for a group of people that, if they were successful, can do nothing for them. And so I thought that was something that everyone needed to know. And it turned out, and I've said this before in episode 30, which is way back, but how the strike was resolved, graduate students more or less got what they wanted, but all of the students who were promised, right? So a lot of undergraduates that participated in the strike that walked out of their class with their teacher, they were promised that when the strike is over, that their teacher, the grad student, would forgive their absence. In other words, it would make it easy for them to make up all of the work. But of course, the strike went on for so long that they were all replaced. And so when they returned to class, their graduate student was no longer, right, the previous graduate instructor was no longer the instructor of the class. And so then what were they supposed to do? And I heard that other professors gave them 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks to make up, or 2 days, 2 days to make up 6 weeks of work, which I thought was kind of harsh, but that was their decision, and that was it's well within the authority of the professor to do that. I had some students who walked out because I took over a bunch of classes, and I told them, well, let's work something out. They never answered my emails because I'm guessing it wasn't just the one class that they ditched. It was all of their classes. So for 6 weeks, they just partied with the grad students, or did whatever they did, you know, but they didn't study. And so they couldn't make up 6 weeks of work in a couple of days for all of their classes. And so they just had to withdraw. But of course, that means they lost at least half of the tuition that they paid. And now they have to finish it. What do you do for the rest of the semester? It was very messy. But the students that I taught and informed, they were glad to have known that there was a choice, that what the downside risk was, and they feel like they made a better choice. So, uh, who speaks for the groups of people who are not really invested or part of whatever phenomena we see? So in the graduate student strike, they weren't grad students and they weren't part of the university. So as an outside observer looking at this, you may have feelings, you may have a belief, you may decide to take a position, but what are you going to put on the line? And so to help them make that decision, they need information. So who speaks for them? Um, and even if the grad students got what they wanted, but either tuition goes up or a lot of them lose their jobs, right? The grad students, the TAs and the uh, right TAs, they lose their job. The position number of TA positions shrink, and that is what happened. But it got worse, right? It was part of this downward spiral because of inflation. That's all throughout society. That's why they were demanding higher wages, right? There's more details in episode 30, but um, so they get what they want, they think, but of course the number of TA positions shrink because now you have to pay them so much more, so they can't have as many positions offered to the grad students. So a lot of them probably lost their scholarships. And now that the economy is turning downward, and because of this ideology and this attitude within the university, the schools it's themselves are in trouble. There's a lot of declining enrollment. I'm sure you've seen it. A lot of schools are closing. Just in my city alone, there are a number of colleges that have been around for a while and are well known. They suddenly close. The ones that are still open, a lot of them have empty dormitories. Um, and I thought it was kind of interesting that none of them saw this coming, right? So if I was president of a university or in a upper level decision-making position, I would not assume that enrollment would always increase. You can't make plans on money that doesn't exist. And that is what happens a lot. And not just in universities, but also in small communities as well. Even the one that I'm living in now, They're planning all these building projects. And I'm asking, like, where's the money going to come from? And obviously, they're planning on raising taxes, right? Because they were banking on increased population. And so, therefore, increased revenue in property taxes and whatnot. But those properties are not selling. And so, therefore, they need to raise taxes on everyone who's still in the district. And I wonder, why is it that so many people, the first thing that they do when they have all this power, they just spend and spend and spend. There must be something, some kind of kickback, benefit, advantage. Maybe they're looking at a higher political position, and so they want to do certain things to be able to catch people's attention, so they can run for a higher office, a more prominent office. But it's ridiculous. So what they do is they bankrupt everyone, put them in dire straits while they pursue their political career. So uh, what happened in the university was, in order to meet the demands of the TAs, the teaching assistants, the graduate students, it put the university in a worse off financial situation. That's not to say that they were being responsible, right? The university itself was being extremely irresponsible, but nevertheless, everyone has an attitude where it's like, give me what you owe me, sort of like the WNBA, right? So people who know nothing about money are then demanding what they think they are owed. And life does not work that way. Okay. And so what I was thinking was that in the university, you have this attitude so strongly represented because there is no ideological diversity in the university. And this is the result of bad discrimination in the teaching staff, right? So people are being hired based on their political ideology, not according to the quality of the teaching that they're going to bring to the table. And so this got me thinking about the movie Hidden Figures, which is right now, I think, on Prime or one of those streaming sites. I saw it. I watched it a while ago when it first came out, and it was a really good movie. And it was about three African American ladies who are extremely talented, smart, and had special skills, mostly in the field of math and engineering. But because of their color, they weren't given opportunity. They were not appreciated. Their skills were not appreciated because of their color. In the one particular one of the women could do math, very, very long math problems in her head. And the way the movie portrayed it is that without her, there might not have been a trip to the moon or a trip to outer space, whatever. I think John Glenn was the astronaut in that movie, and so would there have been a launch if she wasn't there? So it was a pretty cool story. But what is the solution, right? So that movie is trying to highlight how color-based discrimination is really bad, because these really talented women would not have been able to contribute to society. So color-based discrimination is stupid. It's dumb. Get rid of it. But what is also being implied here, is it being implied is the solution affirmative action, right? Oh, look, these African American women were really good at their job, but because they had the determination and grit to overcome this discrimination and be heard, we should give other people that opportunity as well. And so is affirmative action the response, or the proper response, or the solution to color-based discrimination? And I'm like, no, that is exactly the same, except on the opposite side of what they were complaining about, color-based discrimination. Because affirmative action is basically color-based discrimination, except in favor of certain people instead of being against them. Now, whether or not affirmative action works is not going to be the discussion of this episode, which that's not what I do here, but it's to show the hypocrisy of affirmative action, right? The solution is not to get more Black people into jobs like that, or even Black women in positions like that, because what you want is math ability, not skin color, right? So skin color was something that became a problem or that originally created the problem. But if society was free and they were looking for people who had math ability, you don't care about the color of their skin. If you begin to hire because of the color of their skin, because of affirmative action, things like that, you lose efficiency, you lose quality, right? People start working jobs that they should not be working, and people who should be working those jobs don't get those jobs. Okay. So, in other words, so if you hire someone who's African American, maybe someone who's white or someone who's Asian, who are better at that job, but are the wrong color, and so they're not going to get that job. And it's easy to understand that the kind of math ability that you would need for a job like that is extremely rare, right? And it might be that the next 10 people who show up are all white. Do you say I can't hire you because you're white and we're looking for someone who's Black? It doesn't make any sense, right? But if you are saying simply we're looking for math ability, that anyone who wants that job, who thinks their math ability is really, really good, they can get the job. And that's the thing. So it should not be an issue. The discrimination should be focused on the skill that is being sought, right? And so, yes, there is going to be a lot of discrimination in favor of people who have the math ability. What color they are, what gender they are, should not matter at all because it's all about the math ability. Everything else comes after, right? Their social habits, their etiquette, their hygiene, all of that stuff. You can address that after the fact, but what you want is the math ability. I've seen it in the university. I've been on hiring committees where people who are white are not accepted because they are white, right? Because other people on the committee are looking for certain people. And it was they didn't hide it in any way. And I thought that was it was unfortunate that people were hiring by privileging certain characteristics which were unrelated to the job. And that is a losing strategy, right? You don't get a better department. You don't get a better university that way, right? And plus, on top of it all, who is the best? That standard of judging who to hire is always changing, right? Because society is always changing. So, what represents the best is always going to be a question subject to, like, the criteria to answer that question is always going to change. To legalize color-based hiring practices is to bake or legalize failure, right? Bake failure into the cake. You're going to legalize a certain form of discrimination, which is very little, very not that different from the original complaint that people had. But what it does do is eventually leads to failure and normalization of mediocrity, right? So it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not the right color, it doesn't matter, right? And that is terrible. Now, you might say, then all those people who were rejected should be able to find another job with another company or institution. Maybe, but of course, the existence of unions, the standardization of education makes this also not possible. And plus, on top of it, you have too many PhDs without jobs looking around to get a job. And so you can't really interview or get to know your candidates before you make a decision. And so that's why things get extremely arbitrary in terms of standards of who you're going to hire. And keep in mind too, this kind of how shall I say, this kind of color-based discrimination in favor of uh, is not there in all jobs, right? You're not going to talk about equity. You're not going to talk about percentages of the population in certain jobs, right? Only in the ones that catch the attention of university scholars, right? Where they're going to talk about underrepresentation. And I've talked about this before, like in the sewer companies, generally over 90% of employees there are men. Women just don't want that job, right? And so, if the day that you see feminists start actively trying to get more women to take sewer jobs, then I'll start taking them a little bit more seriously. Um, let's see. People have not protested the overrepresentation of African Americans in sport. They haven't done that either. Let's see. Running out of time, so I'll just skip ahead to any legislation for or against color is idiotic and it misses the point, right? People choose to hire who they want. Let people choose to hire who they want, right? Because remember, uh, skill and ability is not tied to your skin color, right? Or your racial categorization, right? So the Hidden Figures women, their math ability is not because they're black, right? They are people who have this math ability who also happen to be black, right? And so you can have anyone who has, and you can see this, all the rags to riches, the hero, underdog, stories, there is a stereotype, there is a prejudice in terms of who can do the work, who can do this task, right? And there's a prejudice of who can and who cannot do it. But that kind of thinking is based on appearance, like skin color. And so what we have to realize is that ability, skills, talent has very little to do with skin color. It can appear anywhere, right? And that's what we have to realize. I mean, you can take pride in the fact and say, oh, that successful person is like me. Sure, do that. But to say that because that person was successful in that field, I should be successful too, that's just weird, right? We don't say that. Most people don't think that way. And so you should let people hire who they want to hire even if it's to discriminate by color, right? So if I'm a racist, right, a certain kind of racist where I only want to hire white people, okay? Let's just say I'm that kind of racist, all right? Okay, but no one else needs to do that. And everyone else will be able to pick up all of the great workers who are not white. And over time, what you will see is that the company who is biased and is focused on skin color will lose in the marketplace as long as society is free. And so you see what I've talked about this in the last episode. You legislate a standard, and everyone has to follow that standard. And so if I'm going to hire by percentages, oh, I need 20% black workers, 10% Asian workers, everyone has to do that. And so now what's happening is that everyone is falling over themselves trying to find black workers because there's not enough of them to go around because everyone is requiring 20% of their workers to be black, but they're just not enough to go around. And so now you're going to start digging a little bit deeper, right? Just to meet the quota, to satisfy the quota, right? And so this is the thing, you create different kinds of problems. And so you got to let people hire who they want. It's always the people who have bad hiring practices. They won't be around for very much longer. And that's what you want. You want the companies that are going to hire the wrong people to fail. And everyone who is hired, well, you got to prove their worth, not by their skin color, right? But by the work that they have done. And so now we're transitioning from a color-based society to a merit-based society, right? And so instead of protecting certain special interest groups, many of whom have no talent at all for the jobs that you are thinking of, right? But rather you are going to protect the individual and the talents and the abilities that they have. That's a merit-based society, right? And you have this merit-based society by protecting everyone. You set them free, everyone, by allowing them the freedom of choice, not by restricting their choices through tons of regulations. So strikes, in addition to being legal extortion, is protection for special interest groups, right? It's the assumption that the union members who are conducting the strike, they are better than anyone else. But that's not necessarily the case. And so those special interest groups then leverage, their monopoly for more pay than what the job is actually worth. And this is why businesses who have union workers who often go on strike, they usually go out of business before long. And you see that problem in the universities now, right? They're closing because they are financially ruined in part. It's all about finances. I saw a Jim Bro video by Learn Liberty. It's called How Gen Z Men Found Politics in the Gym, right? They don't care about your color, your nothing. All that matters is, are you going to put in the work? Are you going to put in the work? Are we going to see those gains? Are we going to see, the bigger muscles, And what was, because it's a merit-based phenomena in the gym, they found politics. They tended to become more conservative in that way. And so the benefits of merit we can see through competition. You need competition. Who does it better, right? If affirmative action produced the better results, then okay. But it would be affirmative action by company. That company's policy is to hire this way or that way. But you wouldn't call it affirmative action, though. You would just say that company is probably just hiring the best talent. People will always be upset no matter what you do and decide to do. But always we have to defer to what the market says. What do the people say? What do the people want? Not what do the privileged few in the university want. All right. And that's it for this episode. But the price of racism, it is very steep. Let people pay it, and then you'll see who is allocating their resources in the best way possible, right? And once you have freedom in this way, the people who engage in bad, arbitrary discrimination, they will always lose in the end. And that's what we want. I'll talk to you guys next time.